My name is Mary, and there was a time when my life seemed to unfold like the pages of a fairy tale. Every chapter perfect, every moment a poetic still. I met Jack in college. He was the dreamy-eyed musician, always carrying his guitar around like an extra limb. I was the practical one, focused on academics and planning for a future in marketing. But when love beckons, even the most organized plans give way. Our wedding was the epitome of beauty and tradition. The white canopy under which we exchanged vows looked like a slice of heaven, garlanded with ivory roses and lilies. The air was filled with the sweet aroma of blooming florals, and the setting sun cast golden rays over our faces as we said, "I do." Our friends and family gathered, their smiles almost as luminous as the afternoon sun. "I can't believe we're finally here," I said, squeezing Jack's hand right before the ceremony began. "Neither can I," he smiled warmly. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Mary." At that moment, I felt invincible. Like together, we could weather any storm. Jack's mother, Susan, who would soon become my mother-in-law, was also thrilled. "Mary, you look absolutely stunning." "I couldn't have wished for a better match for my son," she said, enveloping me in a tender hug. "Thank you, Susan. You've raised an incredible man, and I promise to take good care of him," I assured her. She and I had always gotten along. She was a widow, and Jack was her only son. But from the day I met her, she treated me as a daughter. I could talk to her about anything and everything, from career advice to dinner recipes. Our honeymoon was a 2-week romantic escapade to Italy. We explored the Colosseum, rode a gondola in Venice, and kissed under the Tuscan sun. Those days felt like a dream, each day a beautiful blur melting into the next. When we returned, we moved into a cozy 2-bedroom apartment. Jack had a job in a music store, and I was an entry-level executive at a marketing firm. We lived a simple life, but it was our life, and it was perfect. Susan lived close by, and every Sunday we would have lunch at her place. It was a family tradition that quickly became sacred to us. During these early years, I felt I had it all. A loving husband, a supportive family, a promising career. I had no reason to believe things would ever be different. "Are you happy, Mary?" Jack would often ask me in those days, lying beside me in bed, his eyes searching mine. "Very," I would reply, my head on his chest, listening to the rhythmic beat of his heart. "What about you? Are you happy?" "More than I ever thought possible," he'd say. And then he would kiss me, sealing our happiness with the sanctity of love. Yes, those years felt like the crescendo of a beautiful song, a melodious peak before the tune would abruptly change, turning my dream life into something I could never have prepared for. But that's a chapter for another time. For now, let me dwell a bit longer in the happy memories, in the beauty of a life that once felt like an eternal spring. The joy of discovering I was pregnant was immeasurable. I remember standing in the bathroom, staring at the tiny plus sign on the pregnancy test, a gamut of emotions swirling inside me: excitement, happiness, and just a hint of trepidation. I was eager to share the news with Jack. This was the logical next chapter in our fairy tale, or so I thought. "Jack, guess what? We're going to be parents," I announced, holding up the pregnancy test for him to see as he walked through the door after work. "Wow, that's something," he said, his eyes not meeting mine. There was a noticeable absence of enthusiasm in his voice, and it gave me pause. "Is everything okay? You don't seem as excited as I thought you'd be," I prodded. He sighed. "I'm just a little surprised, that's all." I brushed off his lukewarm reaction, chalking it up to stress, or perhaps the inherent fear most people have when faced with life-changing news. Yet, over the next several weeks, it was as if a wedge had been driven between us. He seemed to retreat into a shell, becoming increasingly distant and aloof. His once endearing silences now seemed fraught with unspoken words. Around the 7th month of my pregnancy, we went to the doctor to find out the gender of our baby. "Congratulations, you're having a baby girl," the doctor exclaimed, pointing to the screen as he conducted the ultrasound. My eyes lit up. "A girl? Oh, that's fantastic." Jack muttered something under his breath. "Yeah, great. You don't sound very happy." "A daughter is a blessing, Jack. Why can't you see that?" He avoided eye contact, fiddling with his phone. "I do see it, Mary. I just have a lot on my mind right now, that's all." That night, he didn't come to bed. I found him on the living room couch the next morning, his bags packed. "Jack, what's going on?" "I need some space, Mary. I'll be staying at a friend's place for a while." I felt a lump in my throat, my heart pounding as if to break free. "Is this how you handle a lot on your mind? By running away?" He sighed, struggling with the words. "I can't do this right now, Mary. I'm not ready for what's coming." With that, he left, vanishing like a specter in broad daylight. His departure was so abrupt, so unexpected, that for days I found myself mechanically dialing his number, listening to the ringing on the other end, each unanswered call driving a nail deeper into the coffin of our relationship. Weeks turned into months. I gave birth to our beautiful daughter, Emily, alone in the hospital room. My mother held my hand as I pushed, her presence a poor substitute for the partner who should have been there but wasn't. And as Emily let out her first cry, her tiny lungs filling with air, her voice filling the room, I knew there was no turning back. Jack was gone, vanished from our lives like a bad dream upon waking. Except this was no dream. This was my life now. A life he had walked out on, leaving behind not just a wife, but also a daughter who would never know her father. But life had to go on, and so I braced myself for the solo journey ahead, unaware of just how rocky the path would become. And so I moved forward, into the unknown, holding close the only family I had left, my daughter Emily. She was my strength, my reason to carry on. If Jack could walk away from this, then he was never the man I thought he was. And as days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years, the hurt gave way to resilience. I had a child to raise, a job to excel at, and a life to live. And live it I would. 7 years is a long time to find your footing, rebuild, and reimagine a life that was meant to be led in tandem. But I did it. I had to. After all, it wasn't just me anymore. I had Emily to think about. By this time, I had climbed the corporate ladder to become a senior executive at a reputable marketing firm. The initial years were tough, the workload staggering. Many times I found myself burning the midnight oil after putting Emily to bed, the silent night my only companion as I tackled endless emails and reports. "Mommy, why do you work so much?" Emily would often ask, her innocent eyes looking up at me, struggling to understand why her mother was always so busy. "Sweetie, I work hard so we can have a good life, so you can go to a good school and we can do fun things together." I'd explain, lifting her onto my lap, treasuring these quiet moments amid the chaos of single motherhood. "I wish you didn't have to," she'd say, cuddling closer, her words a poignant reminder of the dual life I led as a provider and a mother. I'd kiss the top of her head, whispering one day, "Things will be easier, I promise." Aside from the professional challenges, there were personal ones too. I had to navigate the turbulent waters of single parenthood, attending parent, teacher meetings alone, managing household chores, and filling both parental roles to the best of my ability. And then there was Susan, Jack's mother. When Susan fell gravely ill, I found myself at another crossroads. Our relationship had remained cordial. Even after Jack's unceremonious exit, I knew she was alone and had mounting medical bills. So, without a second thought, I began sending her $3,000 a month to help with her health care. Emily and I would also visit her on weekends. The 3 generations of women sitting and talking, a bittersweet semblance of family. "Mary, you're a saint for doing this. After everything my son has put you through," Susan would often say, her frail hand gripping mine. "Don't say that, Susan. You're not to blame for Jack's actions. You're family. And that's what family does. They stick together," I'd reply, my own eyes misty. Susan passed away 2 years ago, and it felt like the closing of a chapter, another tie to Jack severed, willingly or not. We were truly on our own now, Emily and me. The emotional toll was heavy, but every time I looked at Emily, Her smile, her eyes full of curiosity and life. I was reminded that every struggle was worth it. I was building a future for us, laying down a foundation made of grit, sacrifice, and an unbreakable bond of love. In those 7 years, I had forged a life out of the ashes of a broken dream. I had climbed, stumbled, fallen, and picked myself up again, all in the pursuit of a stable, happy life for Emily and me. There were no regrets, no room for what ifs. Life had dealt me a harsh hand, but I had played it to the best of my ability. And so, the years rolled on, each one bringing its own set of challenges and triumphs, but always propelling us forward. I had made peace with the past, forgiven Jack in my own way, for my own sanity, if not for his. But the universe has its own plans, and just when you think you've reached a comfortable plateau, it throws you a curveball, a reminder that life is a series of ups and downs, and the climb is never really over. There's a saying, when one door closes, another opens. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes the door that opens isn't one you'd ever expect to see again. As my work life continued to intensify, it became increasingly challenging to balance it with my role as a single mother to Emily, now a teenager with her own set of complicated emotions and needs. This juggling act felt as though it would break me. The strain was becoming palpable. Enter David. David was an old college friend, someone I'd lost touch with in the whirlwind of marriage, parenthood, and life's unexpected curveballs. We reconnected on social media, and soon enough, we were meeting for coffee and discussing our divergent paths over the years. You seem to have it all, Mary. A successful career and a beautiful daughter. You're amazing, David marveled during one of our coffee meetups. It's been a rough ride, David. I wouldn't call it having it all. More like doing it all. And barely keeping my head above water, I confessed, relieved to open up to someone who seemed to genuinely care. As David started spending more time with Emily and me, I could sense a shift. His presence was like a balm to the jagged edges of our lives. Here was a man who could not only keep pace with me, but also extend a supportive hand when I faltered. And Emily seemed to warm up to him as well, something I hadn't anticipated but was immensely grateful for. One Saturday, after David had helped Emily with a school project, she turned to me and said, "David's really nice, Mom. I like him. Do you like him?" Her question caught me off guard. "Well, yes, Emily, I do. But why do you ask?" She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I just think, it might be nice to have someone else around. We're good, just the two of us, but, well, maybe we could be better with the right person added to the mix." Her words struck a chord. For years, I had been fighting battles on all fronts, a one-woman army marching through life's complexities. The thought of letting someone else in, of potentially sharing the load, hadn't really occurred to me until now. Maybe Emily was right. Maybe it was time to consider the possibility of reinforcements. The time spent with David started making me reevaluate what family could look like for Emily and me. His constant encouragement and help around the house gave me a glimpse of a future where I wouldn't have to go it alone. And slowly but surely, David became a fixture in our lives, someone who could provide emotional support and practical help, from attending Emily's school functions when I couldn't to simply being there to talk at the end of a long day. What do you think of making this official? Moving in together, blending our lives fully? David finally asked one evening, the question hanging heavy in the air, fraught with implications. "Are you sure about this?" I responded, uncertainty clouding my mind. "I've never been more certain about anything. Mary, you and Emily mean the world to me, and I'd like to be there for both of you." Every step of the way, he declared, his eyes meeting mine. And so, in a twist of fate I hadn't seen coming, David became a part of our family unit, an unexpected reinforcement in a life that had been defined by solo struggle. With him by our side, the challenges didn't disappear, but they did seem more manageable, less overwhelming. The universe had thrown me another curveball, but this time it was a welcome one. With David's inclusion, my little family felt more complete, as if we'd found the missing piece to a puzzle we didn't even know was incomplete. It was an unforeseen chapter in a narrative that I thought I had already scripted to its conclusion. But as I was learning, life has its own script. And sometimes it comes with plot twists that, while jarring, can lead to a more enriching story than you could ever pen yourself. Life had begun to settle into a new rhythm. David's presence was a stabilizing force, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. We weren't just existing, we were living. A sense of normality had returned, and with it came the comfort of knowing that if the sky were to fall, I wouldn't be standing alone beneath it. But just when I thought the seas of life were finally calm, there was a knock at the door. A knock that would bring the past crashing back into the present. I opened the door to find him standing there. Jack, after all these years, his face older but still unmistakably his. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, a mixture of surprise, dread, and a whole lot of unanswered questions flooding my mind. "What are you doing here?" I managed to ask, my voice a barely audible whisper. "I think we should talk," he said, his voice carrying a tone of entitlement, as if he had every right to be here after his years' long vanishing act. Just then, Emily emerged from her room. "Who are you? Get out." Her words were firm, her eyes squinted in confusion and animosity. It was clear she felt the invasion of this stranger into her secure world. Jack looked from Emily to me, the shock evident on his face. "She's my daughter," he finally said, his voice tinged with regret. "You gave up that title 7 years ago," I replied, my voice steady despite the emotional turmoil inside me. "You don't get to walk back into her life, or mine, like nothing happened." David, sensing the tension, came out from the kitchen. "Is everything all right?" he asked, immediately sensing that it was anything but. "This is Jack, my ex-husband," I said, making no attempt to hide the bitterness in my voice. "Jack, this is David. He lives here now." Jack's eyes narrowed, taking in the reality that had unfolded in his absence. "So you've moved on?" "Yes, Jack, we have. Because we had to," I said, emphasizing the last words, a reminder of the obligation I had felt for years. The obligation to be everything to Emily, the obligation to fill his void. "You made your choice 7 years ago, and so did we. There's no turning back from that." Jack looked as though he wanted to say more, but what could he say? Words would not rewrite history. They would not patch the gaping holes he had left behind. After what seemed like an eternity, he nodded, turned, and walked away. I closed the door behind him and leaned against it, exhaling deeply. "You okay?" David asked, his eyes filled with concern. "I will be," I replied, taking his hand. It was a moment of finality, a closing of a chapter that had remained painfully open for years. "Mom, who was that?" Emily asked, still bewildered. "That was someone from a past life, sweetheart. Someone who doesn't belong in the life we have now," I said, my eyes meeting David's. Emily nodded, and for a moment we all stood there, united in a complex tapestry of emotions, relief, closure, and above all, the realization that our family, however unconventional, was strong. We had weathered storms before, and we would face whatever else lay ahead, as long as we did it together.